The changing climate, to quote Margaret Atwood, it's not climate change, it's everything change. In the design disciplines, when we think of climate change, we think of built coasts, we think of housing, but in considering everything change, we have to think about multi-species migration, how forests are shrinking, how drought is exacerbated.
Plants are migrating, bird species are migrating, the habitat is moving. Increased salinity, increased acidification, higher surges, and these are the dramatic forces that design really has to tackle.
Climate and environment are two of the kind of largest areas of contemporary thought. Climate is particularly hard because it represents not just an event like weather, but it actually represents a kind of sum total of weather events. So climate is statistical, weather is sort of perceptible. So the imperceptibility of climate, I think, makes it additionally challenging to think, to conceptualize, to react to, and to design for.
Some of the places we've built on are not so well suited to long-term investment, long-term care. And the question that some of these vulnerable areas are posing are whether or not to stay and so-called solve the vulnerable land, such as floodplain, or just accept that we built in the floodplain in the first place and move to higher ground. That's a great deal of what I consider resilience, that in fact, an acceptance and acknowledgement of the risk itself is one of the more resilient things a community can do. Having to build back better in place is certainly not resilient. That is much more what the economy, what policy, and what the regulatory environment forces communities to do. So as designers, we're in a very unique role because we can work directly with the community, we can serve in stewardship and advocacy for the land itself and for those that have a close kinship with it.
Sea level rise will be felt, I think, painfully in certain cities first. Miami is among those first, partly because of its location, partly because of its elevation, partly because of its building boom and the kind of relentless construction and speculation. I'm teaching a studio on the topic of climate change in Miami. Even though it's a kind of an architectural studio, it does touch on issues of urban design and social justice, politics, climate gentrification.
My current studio is entitled Adrift and Indeterminate, Designing for Perpetual Migration on Virginia's Eastern Shore. We know that the land is subsiding and that the sea level is rising and that the weather is more turbulent and that surges are happening with greater frequency. The people that we spoke with think of it as erosion and we speak in practical terms about it. And so the students have really taken this to heart and they're tackling things that people face every day as design problems. We're working with things like protection. They're building oyster reefs, and this is part of what we think of as land protection strategy. They have been migrating upland, and this is another thing that we're designing to move up and in. We're looking at how salt intrusion into the farm soils are causing a migration of the farming itself. And we're seeing that aquaculture is beginning to replace farming in some places where we now have essentially protected grasslands that are submerged.
We need land-based practices that are particular to place and not models that are global in scale and in scope. That is one of the tricks of our trade that plays into globalization and capitalism that in fact feeds the climate dislocation itself. And how can we act in adaptable ways to these negative effects? And that's what design can really do, is bring optimism to a community and work with governance to unpack and unravel some of the standards that we're stuck in.